Hi, I'm Leslie Anderson, and I'm a therapist at the UC San Diego Health Eating Disorder Center.
Hi, I'm Anne Cusack, and I'm also a therapist at the same center. Today we're going to talk a little bit about building a life worth living and what that looks like in the time of COVID-19. I know that we have been going through all of a variety of different skills from the DBT manual, and this concept that we're going to talk about today is actually more of like a foundational concept in DBT and not necessarily a skill you'd find in the manual, but it's something that truly, I think, encompasses all the skills, and part of the reason why we use skills is so that we can have this life worth living that we're working on building. So the idea of a life worth living is that we want to be able to do things in our day-to-day that really help us live in line with our values and set us up for a life that we don't want to escape from, right? A life that we want to be able to be in and be present with and fully participate in. And in order to do that, we have to be able to identify what our values are and work towards them. We oftentimes think about values in like kind of two different categories for life worth living. The category of relationships, whether that be family or friendships or coworkers or romantic relationships with partners. And we also think of the category of like sort of achievement and success, whether it be education, whether it be in your career, employment, volunteering, things like that. Like things that kind of you're doing with your time and the people that you're connecting with your time. And obviously both of those categories are going to look pretty vastly different right now for everyone, given that we're in this global pandemic. We've had a lot of patients in recovery from their eating disorder express frustration that pause has sort of been pushed on all of the progress they've made building their life worth living, because you might not be able to go to work right now and you might not be able to connect with people in the same way that you would. So we just wanted to kind of have a chat about life worth living and how that might look now in the time of COVID.
And this is really important, like Anne's point about how this can derail recovery. I think a lot of eating disorder recovery consists of building a life worth living outside your eating disorder, because then the eating disorder seems less important or less relevant or less necessary because now you're involved and excited about other things instead. And so I think it's a really crappy time for people in recovery from an eating disorder, because maybe that job that they got that they're excited about, or that new friend that they just made that they were excited about hanging out with, like those things are suddenly off the table. And I think there can be this mentality of like, well, I guess I might as well go back to my eating disorder then. Like I knew this wasn't going to work out. Like this is, this thing that I was working towards isn't here anymore. So might as well just go back to what I know. And we really want to talk about how you can build a life worth living during the COVID crisis, and how you can also keep in mind that this isn't going to last forever and you are going to get a chance to build the kind of life that you want once this is over. So don't throw your recovery away right now.
Yeah, I think the really important component of that is that how we all handle this ongoing crisis in the time in between when life sort of seems shut down is going to have a huge impact on how all of our lives look when the world sort of opens back up, right? And so for our patients in recovery from an eating disorder, if behaviors are the thing that sort of returns, it's going to be a lot harder to go back to work. It might be impossible to go back to school. Your relationships might be in a place where repairing is going to take a really long time. If the time during COVID has really been a time when behaviors have sort of escalated again. And so part of this building a life worth living, exactly like Leslie was saying, is being able to radically accept day by day that you need to do things in line with your values in order to have your life worth living sort of look the way you want it to when COVID is in a more stable spot and the world is kind of reopened. So let's talk about the first category of relationships. So I don't know about you guys, but relationships right now are pretty all or nothing, right? You're either with someone all the time or you're with someone 0% of the time. And that takes a pretty big toll, I think, on all of our relationships. So like, for example, my family is really, really far away, like kind of in the Midwest. And when I think about, oh my gosh, they're really far away from me, it's easy to sort of get in this place of like, throw my hands up, capitulating, I'm never going to see them again. So like, what's the point? And part of my life worth living is really connecting with my family. So we have this like family text that's going sort of all day long. We do like family Zooms. We do sort of some funny like video messages to each other on a really regular basis to just like stay connected. Because if I just said to myself, well, I'm not going to see my family in person for who knows how long, probably that would really impact our relationship on like a pretty dire level.
And some of us are a little too connected to our family.
Mhm.
We might live with them. We might be around them 24/7. We might be desperate to get out of the house.
Mhm.
And, I'm just
Just hypothetically.
hypothetically
Yeah.
speaking, maybe we like really need to get away from them for a few hours and they're driving us crazy. So, it feels like a time of extremes when it comes to relationships.
And I think the important component of building a life worth living is sort of keeping that long-term value of relationships in mind and not acting in the moment out of anger if you're with your family all the time and you're like, I have to get away from you, but being able to just recognize like this relationship is important to me. So what do I need to do in the moment so that I don't do something to damage it, even though it might not look the way that I want it to look.
And I think, I feel alternatively this urge to be around people and be close to people, and then this like weird urge to isolate and withdraw and not talk to anyone.
Exactly.
And I think, this is a time to embrace connecting with people that you might not be able to see on a regular basis, and really resist that urge if it's there for you to like not answer the phone or not answer texts or not engage in Zoom calls, and really just kind of try your best to keep those relationships going so that they're still there once the pandemic ends, and so that your life feels worth living in terms of meaningful relationships right now, even if they look different than how you want them to look.
I've heard a lot of people talking about like the shift in online dating that's happening during the pandemic, and that people are like, I actually like it more because you have to talk to the people and like get to know them. You can't just like meet immediately. So, just really keeping in mind what your relationship values are and thinking to yourself when the world sort of reopens in a healthy, effective way one day, how do I want my relationships to look and what do I need to do now, even though everything looks different right now, to help facilitate that. In terms of things like job and education, I feel so much sadness for everyone who is a senior in high school and a senior in college, and they're missing like all of these big benchmarks and milestones. And so, of course, it's really easy to think like, I don't want to be a part of these online graduations or, whatever online proms or Zoom classes that I have to be taking. And there could be really detrimental effects of not participating in any of those things, right? Like it's really important to throw yourself in as much as you can, even if it looks totally different than how you might want it to look.
And at the same time, recognizing that none of this is easy.
No.
None of us wanted all of our classes to shift to online.
Mhm.
I think even though teleworking might have its benefits, probably most of you were not planning on abruptly shifting your entire job or career to a telework situation.
Mhm.
For those of you who are essential workers and are still going in, my guess is that your job is more stressful than you ever could have imagined that it would be, because now you're worried about illness and maybe you're busier than you were before. So for all of us, I think our plans in terms of like our career and our job and the things that we feel a sense of mastery from, those have shifted again in sort of a dialectical polar opposite way. Either it's all been ripped out from under you, or it's all much more stressful and intense than you really had bargained for it to be.
And in terms of building a life worth living, again, is keeping those long-term values in mind, right? So if learning and education is something that's really important to you, if you're like, I'm not going to participate in my online Zoom classes because they're not how I want it to be and it's really hard and overwhelming, that's just going to pull you further away from your value. And that one day when you can go back to class or you can get a job in your major or whatever it might be, it's going to be way harder to do that. And so really trying to keep in mind that as hard as it is and as uncomfortable as those emotions are, continuing to take steps towards those things will help you when your job and school looks more the way that it did before all of this happened. Similarly with things like volunteering, I know we talk a lot about volunteering as a way to kind of help each other and help improve the moment, help regulate our emotions when things are really hard. And I've heard a lot of people say that it's been hard to lose that kind of connection of helping other people. A lot of volunteer opportunities are closed. And so really figuring out how to still do that. And I think that trying to just sort of shift the way that you've been volunteering and helping to a way that might be more a response to this current moment and the current needs of this time can still be really impactful and empowering, right? So I've heard a lot of patients who have done things like they're not volunteering at the like hospital or the shelter that they had been volunteering at anymore, but now they're like spending time, donating masks to hospitals, or figuring out if they can raise money for like food service industry workers who have been unemployed, just things of that variety to still sort of give back, because if that's something that's in your value system, you'll feel really connected to it, being able to continue to do it just in a new way. So building a life worth living, as hard as it is and as many barriers as there are right now, it's just a lot about set shifting and trying to figure out how you can do it in a way that responds to the current moment, so that when we can go back to the way things were, you're in a place to do that emotionally and behaviorally.
Yeah, so life worth living, there's not a specific worksheet page on it. And this is still one of the absolute most important skills in DBT. So we hope that you guys are all keeping this one in mind, even during this incredibly challenging time.
And we will be back with some more skills for you very soon.